She was used to being invisible, just another waitress in a sea of white tablecloths and expensive wine. But that night, when a wealthy man called her out in front of everyone, mocking her voice, daring her to play the grand piano, something changed. He expected a joke, a failure, something to laugh at, but when her fingers touched the keys, the entire room went silent, and in that moment, what was meant to humiliate her became something unforgettable. Because sometimes the ones people ignore the most carry the sound that shakes the world. It was a Friday night at Langston's, one of those sleek, upscale restaurants in downtown Atlanta where the food costs more than most people's rent. Lorena Brooks moved between tables with the quiet precision of someone who knew how to disappear. She smiled politely, cleared plates, refilled glasses, and sang softly to herself when no one was listening, except someone was. Richard Calloway, a real estate mogul known more for his ego than his investments, sat at the corner table, bored out of his mind. His eyes locked onto Lorena as she passed by, humming an old gospel melody under her breath. He snapped his fingers. "You sing, sweetheart," he said, loud enough for half the room to hear. "Why don't you give us a little show?" Lorena froze, unsure whether to walk away or respond. But Richard wasn't done. "There's a piano right there. Go on, entertain us," he grinned smugly. "Unless all that humming is just noise." A hush fell over the dining room. Eyes turned. Someone whispered her name. With trembling hands, Lorena stepped toward the piano, and as she sat down, not even she could have imagined what was about to happen next. Before you hear what left an entire room speechless, hit subscribe and turn on the bell. These are the stories they don't tell, the kind that stay with you. Don't miss what's coming next. Be part of a community that feels every note, every silence, every fight to be heard. Lorena Brooks was born in the south side of Atlanta, where the sidewalks cracked like the futures of the kids who ran over them. Her mother, Denise, worked 2 cleaning jobs, sometimes 3, just to keep the lights on and food in the fridge. Lorena never met her father, and by the time she was 10, she had already learned how to fold laundry, cook rice, and lock the door behind her mother when she left before sunrise. But there was something else in her life, something that made all the noise fade. Music. At the old neighborhood church, there was a worn-out piano with a broken G key. That was where Lorena first learned to play. She wasn't taught formally. She watched the older choir members, copied their hands, and practiced until her fingers bled. The instrument was old, but it sang for her. The moment she sat down, the world felt fair. By the time she was 16, people told her she had something special, a kind of soul in her playing that you couldn't teach. She dreamed of being a classical pianist, of stages, of symphonies, of escape. But dreams, she'd come to learn, don't always fit in bank accounts. She got into a local music conservatory with a partial scholarship, but transportation, books, and daily living costs were another story. Still, she tried. For 2 years, she woke up at dawn, took 2 buses, and worked part-time just to stay in the program. The music was everything, her only light. But not everyone saw her light. At school, she felt like a shadow. Surrounded by wealthy kids with private tutors and grand pianos in their homes, Lorena was the anomaly. The poor girl with calloused fingers and thrift store shoes. She smiled through it, pretended it didn't sting when she heard the whispers, when professors overlooked her, when her performances were skipped over during recitals. Eventually, she had to leave. Money ran out. Her mother got sick. Reality won. Now, at 29, she worked tables at Langston's, wearing a borrowed smile and keeping her music buried deep inside. But sometimes, when no one was listening, it escaped. Just a little. And that little was all it took for a man like Richard Calloway to notice. Before Langston's, before the silence, there was only the dream. Lorena didn't just love music. She needed it. When she played, it felt like speaking a language no one could interrupt. Her fingers told stories of pain, hope, and resistance. The church piano had been her first love, But what she really longed for was a Steinway in a concert hall, an audience hushed in reverence, and her name in programs beside Beethoven, Chopin, and Debussy. When she got the call from the Atlanta Music Conservatory saying she'd been accepted, partial scholarship, she ran to her mother, sobbing with joy. Denise hugged her tightly, whispering, "You were born for more than struggle, baby." It wasn't easy. Nothing ever had been. But Lorena was used to tight schedules and tighter wallets. She juggled classes with a waitressing job at a diner that paid in tips and leftovers. Her mornings started in the dark. Her nights ended with sore feet and blistered hands. And still, she practiced. Late nights at the conservatory's practice rooms were sacred. She'd close her eyes, press the keys, and let the music carry her. In those fleeting hours, she believed that maybe, just maybe, she belonged there. There were moments that gave her hope. A professor once paused outside her door, listening. A classmate whispered that her playing gave them goosebumps. A small performance at a community center brought the crowd to tears. Lorena tucked those moments into her chest like armor, but for every spark there was a shadow. The school was prestigious, and she was a guest. Most of her classmates came from money, private lessons since childhood, parents who funded music rooms in their homes. Lorena was the outsider, always 5 steps behind, constantly proving she deserved her seat. She worked harder than anyone, but effort didn't always translate into respect. When she auditioned for a solo performance at the winter recital, she poured everything into it. Hours of practice, sleepless nights, a piece so personal it felt like prayer. But her name didn't make the list. The student who got the solo, a boy whose fingers stumbled and who admitted he hadn't even wanted it. Lorena didn't say anything. She smiled, clapped, pretended it didn't hurt, because she still had hope. Still believed that one day her talent would speak louder than her background, that the world would hear her, and finally see her. The disappointment from the recital cut deeper than Lorena admitted, even to herself, but it wasn't enough to make her quit. Not yet. She returned to the practice rooms, kept her head down, told herself she'd prove them wrong next time. That talent had to win eventually. But then came the spring showcase. It was the biggest event of the year. Invitations went out to donors, patrons, and local press. Being selected meant exposure, opportunity, a spotlight. Lorena worked harder than ever, choosing a piece that blended classical structure with gospel undertones. It was her roots and her training, stitched into sound. When she submitted her audition, her hands were shaking. She knew what was at stake. She didn't make the list. No explanation, no feedback, just another polite rejection delivered in a mass email. She waited after class to speak with the showcase director, Professor Aldridge, a man known for his standards. When she asked, he didn't look up from his papers. "Your playing lacks refinement," he said flatly. "Passion is not precision." Lorena nodded slowly, heart cracking inside her chest. She wanted to scream, "Did you even listen?" But she didn't. That night, she stayed late, playing alone in the empty recital hall. Every note bled with the question, "What more can I give?" Then came the final blow. At the end of the semester, the conservatory sent a letter. Due to unpaid fees and missed rehearsals, caused by her work schedule, her enrollment would be suspended unless she paid $200 within 2 weeks. Lorena stared at the paper in silence. She had $62 in her account. She tried everything. Called the financial office, begged for an extension, worked doubles at the diner, even sold her keyboard. Still, it wasn't enough. On the last day to pay, she walked to the registrar's office, stood in line, and quietly withdrew. She told no one, just left. The next morning, she didn't go to class. She went to work. The apron felt heavier than usual. Her smile, more hollow. And just like that, the dream she had clung to with everything she had was gone. She told herself it was temporary, that she'd go back someday. But deep down, she knew. Something had broken, not just her spirit, but her belief that the world would ever let someone like her rise. The weeks after Lorena left the conservatory blurred together like grey smog. Mornings started with silence. No alarm, no rush, no piano, just the distant hum of a city that didn't care whether she played or not. She picked up extra shifts at Langston's. Rent was due, and her mum's health had started to slip. Denise was forgetful, tired all the time, complaining of headaches and weakness. They couldn't afford a proper doctor, but Lorena knew something was wrong. When the diagnosis came, a mild stroke, the world tilted. Lorena spent her mornings helping her mother with basic tasks, and her evenings pretending to be cheerful while serving shrimp cocktail to men in designer suits. Her dreams felt like someone else's now, some foolish girl she used to be. Music? That was a luxury, and Lorena had no room left for luxuries. At Langston's, she became part of the furniture, efficient, quiet, unseen. The customers didn't ask her name. They looked through her like she was glass. Some even mistook her for part of the cleaning staff. She smiled anyway, always smiled, but when she got home and locked the door behind her, the weight came crashing down. There were nights when she sat on the floor of the tiny living room, headphones in, listening to the recordings she'd made back when she still believed. Chopin, Debussy, a bit of gospel. Her fingers twitched in memory, aching to play. But there was no keyboard anymore. She'd sold it for groceries, and so she listened and cried quietly, so her mum wouldn't hear. Some evenings, she'd sit on the back steps, singing under her breath, just enough to feel something stir in her chest. But even that scared her. What if hope came back? What if it made her believe again, only to lose it? Better to keep it buried. The lowest point came 3 months after she left the conservatory. She was clearing tables late one night when a familiar face walked in. Jordan Fisk, a former classmate. He was with a group of well-dressed friends, laughing loudly. He didn't recognize her at first, but when he did, his eyes widened. "Lorena, wow, I didn't know you worked here." She froze. "Yeah, just part-time." He nodded, awkward. "I saw your name on the withdrawal list. I thought, I don't know. You had real talent." "Thanks," she said quickly, forcing a smile. "Enjoy your evening." He left a $20 tip, and it felt like a funeral bouquet. That night, Lorena sat on her bed and stared at her hands, the same hands that once made people cry with a single note. Now used to carry trays and scrub wine stains. She hated them. She hated herself for letting go, but more than anything, she hated that no one had fought for her. That talent alone wasn't enough, that being good, truly good, meant nothing when you came from nothing. She began to believe what they'd hinted all along. She didn't belong. The music hadn't left her, but she had walked away from it, and now she wasn't sure she'd ever find her way back. If any part of this story reminds you of your own journey, of being overlooked, silenced, or fighting to reclaim your voice, leave a comment below. And if her courage moves you even a little, tap the like button. Sometimes a single gesture says, "I see you. I've been there too." It happened on a slow Tuesday afternoon. Lorena was cleaning the bar area, humming softly, barely a whisper. An old hymn her mother used to sing while folding laundry. She thought no one was around. Most of the tables were empty, the clink of glasses, the low murmur of the kitchen. Just another day, until she heard someone clear their throat. She turned and saw him, an older man sitting alone at a corner table, dressed in a worn tweed jacket. He looked out of place among the expensive suits and shiny watches. His eyes were kind, quiet, observant. "I know that song," he said gently. "My grandmother used to sing it." "You made it sound honest." Lorena smiled shyly. "Just something from church." He nodded. "You ever sing for real?" She hesitated. "Used to play piano, a while ago." "Must have been something," he said, not as a compliment, but as a quiet truth. He didn't ask why she stopped. He just reached into his coat and pulled out a $20 bill, folding it around a slip of paper. "Keep singing," he said. "Don't let this place silence your soul." When he left, she opened the note. It said, "The world needs your sound. Even if it doesn't know it yet." She stared at it for a long time. That night, after her shift, she walked home in silence. The words echoed in her head, louder than anything she'd heard in months. She dug through a box in her closet, old journals, concert programs, photos from the conservatory. At the bottom, wrapped in a sweater, was a flash drive. On it were recordings of her playing, pieces she hadn't listened to in over a year. She plugged it into her mom's old laptop, and there it was, her sound, full of mistakes maybe, but real, full of breath, full of her. She cried while listening, not out of regret, but because for the first time in so long, she remembered who she was. The next morning, she took the long way to work, passing by the church where she first learned to play. The doors were locked, but she peeked through the window. The piano was still there, dusty, silent, but waiting. Something inside her shifted. She didn't know how, or when, or if it would even matter, but she made herself a promise. She would play again, even if no one listened, even if it broke her, because silence had become a prison, and music was her only way out. Lorena started small. Late at night, when the last customer had left and the kitchen lights dimmed, she'd ask the dishwasher, Marcus, to leave the dining room door open just a bit longer. Langston's had a grand piano. Purely decorative, of course. No one ever touched it. It sat by the wall like a prop in a theater set, waiting for a scene that never came. One night, Lorena dusted off the keys and sat down, her heart thudding like a drum. She didn't play anything fancy, just a simple melody, slow, soft, just enough to remember what her fingers could still do. The sound echoed through the empty restaurant, fragile and honest. That first night, she played for 10 minutes. The next night, 20. Then she started recording herself, not for anyone, just to hear it back, to study the tremble in her left hand, the uncertainty in her rhythm. She knew she wasn't who she once was, but she wasn't lost either. Soon it became routine. After closing, she'd wipe tables, change into a hoodie, and return to the piano. She brought sheet music from home, downloaded new pieces onto her phone, and started to rebuild what she had buried. Then one night she did something brave. She uploaded a clip, just 1 minute. No face, just hands. Titled it Unfinished. She didn't tell anyone, just posted it to a new YouTube channel under the name LB Sounds. She went to bed thinking nothing of it. The next morning it had 12 views, a week later 47. Then someone left a comment. This healed something I didn't know needed healing. She stared at those words for a long time. It wasn't about fame or getting back what she lost. It was about reconnecting with the part of herself she thought was gone forever. At work, she was still invisible, still fetching wine, cleaning up messes, smiling through exhaustion. But now she had a secret, a sacred hour each night, a growing archive of videos, a tiny corner of the internet where she was more than just a waitress. She was an artist again, and though she hadn't told her mother yet, Lorena knew, somehow, she was beginning to come back to life. The fire hadn't died. It had just been waiting for her to stop pretending she didn't still burn. Progress was never linear. Some nights, Lorena felt unstoppable, her fingers flowing like they used to, her channel slowly growing, comments filling her inbox with words like soulful, raw, and thank you. But then came the doubt. There were videos with barely 10 views. Others were criticized, comments calling her sloppy, unpolished, or trying too hard. She told herself not to care, but the words stuck. One night, a comment read, "This is why you're not in a real conservatory." She sat for an hour staring at the screen, frozen. That voice, it didn't feel like a stranger. It felt like Professor Aldridge, like the whispers in the hallway, like her own inner echo saying, "You'll never be enough." She didn't post for 3 weeks after that. And then the worst happened. She stopped by the church one morning, hoping to practice. The front door was open, too open. Inside, the place had been vandalized. Spray paint on the walls, windows shattered. The piano was in pieces. She dropped to her knees beside it, her hands trembling as she touched the broken keys like a friend she'd failed to protect. The pastor stood behind her. "They broke in last night, took the sound system, smashed everything else." Lorena couldn't speak. That piano had been her beginning, her sanctuary. Now, it was just another thing in her life reduced to silence. She walked home slowly, hands in her pockets, jaw clenched. Maybe this was the world's way of telling her to stop trying. Maybe music wasn't hers anymore. That night she didn't play, didn't record, didn't listen. She just sat by the window staring at the city lights and wondering if they were watching someone else's dream come true. But the next morning she found the note again, the one from Mr. Harold Green, still folded in her wallet. "The world needs your sound, even if it doesn't know it yet." She whispered those words to herself like a prayer, and then she remembered something. She didn't need a grand piano, she needed truth. So she borrowed an old MIDI keyboard from a friend, taped up the broken keys, and placed it on her kitchen table. The sound was tinny, imperfect, but it was hers. She recorded a new video that night, called it "Still Here." No intro, no edits, just a broken girl playing broken keys with a voice that refused to stay silent. And somehow, that video found people. People who knew what it meant to lose something, and still choose to sing anyway. It was supposed to be just another Friday night. Lorena clocked in, tied her apron, and began another long shift at Langston's. The night was busy, laughter, silverware clinking, glasses filled and refilled. Nothing unusual, until he walked in. Richard Calloway. She recognized him immediately. The smirk, the air of entitlement, the way he looked around like the place belonged to him. He was seated at table 7, prime real estate in the dining room. A small group surrounded him, other men in suits, 2 women in cocktail dresses, and the unmistakable tension that came with wealth and boredom. Lorena avoided his table, letting Marcus handle the first round of drinks. But when dessert came around, she had no choice. She approached with a polite smile. Richard looked up, eyes narrowing. "Hey," he said, snapping his fingers. "You're the one that hums." Her stomach tightened. "You sing, right? You play too?" She hesitated. "I used to." "Still got it?" She opened her mouth, unsure of what to say, but he continued. "There's a piano right there. Come on, let's see it. Just a little something." "We're bored," the others chuckled. It wasn't a request. It was a performance order. She looked to the manager. He was watching, unsure. She looked around the restaurant, curious faces, half interested, waiting. And for a moment she thought about saying no, about walking out. But then she saw something else. A younger server watching her with wide eyes. A busboy, maybe 16, who looked like he'd never seen anyone like him almost be something more. So she walked to the piano. Her hands trembled. She sat down, feeling the weight of 100 failures on her back. The room quieted. She placed her fingers on the keys and played, not to prove anything, not for them. She started with a classical piece, something soft, familiar. But then she transitioned, blending it with gospel, jazz, something deeper. Something that sounded like Atlanta streets, broken keyboards, late-night practice rooms, and a girl who had learned to find beauty in pain. The room fell completely silent. Richard leaned back, his smirk slowly fading. Even the servers stopped moving. When she finished, there was no immediate applause, just stunned silence. Then, a slow, building wave of claps, rising like a tide. Someone stood, then another. And then the sound filled the room. She stood, breathless, unsure of what had just happened. As she turned to walk back, a man approached her, tall, early 40s, wearing a simple black jacket. "I'm Jamal Harris," he said, holding out his hand. "I run a small label downtown. I've been looking for someone like you." Lorena blinked. "Like me? Someone who doesn't just play music," he said. "Someone who is music." He handed her a card. "If you're serious, call me. What you did just now, that wasn't a performance. That was a resurrection." She stared at the card, heart pounding. Richard Calloway sat in stunned silence, sipping his drink, the smirk long gone. The night continued, but Lorena felt something different in the air. Not victory, not revenge, freedom. She had taken the very stage meant to humiliate her and turned it into her own. And this time, the applause wasn't for someone they expected to succeed. It was for someone who had no business surviving, but did. Lorena didn't become a viral sensation overnight. There was no headline, no instant fame, no explosion of followers. What happened was quieter, deeper. That performance at Langston's didn't change the world, but it changed her. For the first time, she saw herself through different eyes, not as someone who failed out of a conservatory, not as a waitress who let her dreams slip through her fingers, but as a woman who refused to let silence define her. She started playing more, recording more, saying yes to small gigs, community centers, and even a Sunday spot at the same church where it all began. Her channel, still modest, grew slowly, but the comments grew louder in meaning. I watched this after losing my job. Thank you. This made me cry. I didn't know why I needed it. I almost gave up, but you reminded me not to. Lorena learned something she wished someone had told her years earlier. Success isn't always loud. It doesn't always wear tuxedos or speak with polish. Sometimes it comes quietly, in cracked voices, broken keys, and second chances. Sometimes it shows up after the crowd's already left, and all that's left is truth. And truth, it always finds a way to be heard. 2 years later, Lorena Brooks no longer wore aprons. She still worked hard, maybe harder than ever, but now her labor was purpose-driven. She taught music at a youth center on the same side of Atlanta where she'd grown up. Every Thursday afternoon, a room full of wide-eyed kids crowded around her, some with real talent, others just looking for someone to believe in them. She never turned anyone away. With help from Jamal Harris and a small grant, she launched Keys for Change, a community initiative offering free music lessons and refurbished instruments to children in underserved neighborhoods. Her YouTube channel, LB Sounds, passed 100,000 subscribers. Not because she chased views, but because people chased her truth. Each video was raw, unfiltered, and real. No makeup, no fancy lighting. Just a woman and her piano, telling the stories no one else would. She still walked by Langston's sometimes. It eventually closed, replaced by a cafe with patio seating and overpriced lattes. Richard Calloway's name had faded from the business scene, lost in scandals and lawsuits. But Lorena? She never faded. She had become a symbol, not of revenge, but of restoration, of what happens when you refuse to be defined by someone else's silence. How many times have you been underestimated? How many rooms have you walked into where people already decided who you were before you said a single word? Lorena Brooks was never supposed to be more than a waitress. At least, not in the eyes of those who judged her by her uniform, her skin, her silence. But the moment she sat down at that piano, she shattered every expectation. And now, we want to hear from you. Have you ever been silenced, mocked, or told you weren't enough? What did you do when the world tried to define your worth? Share your story in the comments. Tell us what you overcame, or what you're still fighting to rise above. Because someone out there might need your voice just as much as Lorena needed hers. If this story moved you, don't keep it to yourself. Like, subscribe, and send it to someone who needs to remember. Your voice matters, even if no one's listening yet. And always, always remember this. Sometimes the ones they try to humiliate are the ones the world will never forget.